Well, that wasn't great. I just got a stern talking to from the authorities telling me that I should not be doing this here. That's fine. Hey kid, wanna buy a big truck? I'm like, yeah. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Sam, and you're watching Adventure Vehiculist. And today, I bet you would never guess, I bought a new toy. Yeah, it seems like I do this a lot. You know, a while back, I told you guys that I was really happy with what I had. I wasn't going to change anything, I was just going to enjoy what I had for a while. I didn't do that. It seems like I never do that, actually. As soon as that video was over, I traded the motorcycle that I had, DRZ 400 SM, for a Jeep Wrangler. Didn't really like the Jeep Wrangler, ended up selling that. I went motorcycle shopping and I went and looked at a bunch of bikes. I was really looking for an FZ6. I've ridden an FZ6 before, a buddy of mine had one, I really liked it. I could not for the life of me find a decent example of an FZ6 anywhere. I went and rode an FC1. And it was beautiful. It had low mileage. It was really, really clean. As soon as I rode it, I was like, man, this is too much motorcycle for me. Like, I tried to convince myself that it was a good idea, but I just could not bring myself to do it. I realized it was too much bike. It was too fast. I didn't like how heavy it was. The steering was kind of really slow and sluggish, especially at slow speeds. It just wasn't the motorcycle I was looking for. I really wanted something that felt like a Supermoto. I really liked my Supermoto. The only problem that I had with the Supermoto is that it just wasn't powerful enough. It didn't have enough top speed, enough guts for the highway, especially for like prolonged periods. You could get away with doing a little bit here and there, but on a long trip, it was just really buzzy. It was really uncomfortable. It just wasn't the thing. And I did a bunch of research, did a bunch of looking and trying to find exactly what it was that I really wanted. And originally, I kind of settled on an FZ09, and I thought, yeah, this seems like a great bike. This looks like what I really want. And then I started to do some comparisons. I found a couple of videos. I want to make a shout out to a guy on YouTube called Jake the Garden Snake. He had a build series on an FZ07, and he talked a lot about his FZ07 and how it compares to the FZ09. And he was like, you know, props to people that ride the FZ09. The FZ09 is a nice bike, whatever, but he really liked the FZ07. And so then I went down this whole new rabbit hole and I went and researched FZ07s. And a lot of the research that I did, a lot of the people saying, what people were saying about the bikes really resonated with me, which is that the FZ09 is really fast. It has a ton of power. It has a monster motor in it. But it's kind of heavier, it's kind of more sluggish in the steering department, it's just not quite as nimble feeling as the FZ07. And since that was really the thing that I wanted, it kind of convinced me that what I was really looking for is an FZ07. And yeah, spoiler alert, that's pretty much what I bought. When I first started shopping for the FZ MT bikes, one of the things that I noticed is that it is actually pretty hard to find a good deal on one. They're really popular and a lot of people just seem to hang on to them. It's one of those bikes that gets modified a lot and messed with a lot. It's hard to find a stock example, and it's really hard to find a low mileage example because most people who buy these bikes actually ride the shit out of them. A lot of motorcycles that you find on Marketplace, you'll find bikes that are a couple years old. They have 1,000 miles on them. And the guy's like, you know, I'm the original owner. I financed this thing and I never rode it. You see that a lot. I personally, you know, speaking from my experience and looking at the Marketplace for hours on end. I see that mostly with sport bikes. I see tons of R6s, R1s, CBR 600RR, CBR 1000RR that have low miles and they've barely been ridden because somebody bought it thinking it was just the coolest thing, and then they realized they didn't want to ride it. It's uncomfortable, it's stupid fast, it's scary fast, it's too much power for the street. Every time you throw your leg over your CBR 1000RR, you're reminding yourself that you're probably never even going to touch wide open throttle. If you do, it's going to be for like a hint of a second, and then you're done because there's a corner coming up and it's already time to shut it down. There's an old saying that it is more fun to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow, and it's absolutely true in motorcycles too. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize it, which is why these smaller naked bikes are starting to get so much traction and become so popular. So a couple days ago I had a Tundra and I sold that. I sold the canopy off of it. It gave me a nice little chunk of money, and I went FC MT07 shopping, and I actually was planning on buying a pre-facelift model, something a little older, and it was comparing all the prices on them. To give you guys some perspective, the best example I could find besides this one was a 2018 with 6,000 miles. It had some aftermarket parts on it, which they all seem to, and the lady, she's asking 6,000. I talked her down to 5,500. She said no to 5K. So 5,500 was pretty much the price for a 2018 with 6,000 miles. Now that's not a bad deal, and I did like the pre-facelift model. It also had the high-vis wheels, which I think look stellar. I would have really been stoked to get a bike that had the high-vis wheels. It would have matched my gear really well. One of the biggest problems that I had with that bike is that the woman was super slow to respond to me. The first time I messaged her, it took her over a day to get back to me. I messaged her right back as soon as she got back to me, and it took her a whole nother day to get back to me. And I was so impatient to go buy a bike. I was like, you know, if you can't answer me, I'm just gonna go buy something else. So I kept shopping and I kept looking. I found a couple of the worst example on the marketplace. The worst one I could find was a 2015 that had a bunch of stunner mods on it that had obviously been beaten. The guy's profile picture was him doing wheelies on it, and he wanted 5K. It had 20,000 miles, and he wanted 5K for it. And I was like, man, these bikes, they're just holding value. They're such a great bike, and everybody knows it, and they're so desirable that you just can't find an example for under 5K, is what I seem to have discovered. And so with all that in mind, I found this bike. This bike is a 2021, and it had 2,500 miles on it when I bought it. I paid $6 grand, which is a smidgen more, in my opinion, than what I would have paid for a much worse example. And honestly, that's the main reason I bought it. I didn't need an example that was this nice, but it realistically wasn't a whole lot more money than buying one that was not nearly as nice. This thing is like brand new. 2021 with under 3,000 miles. I'm actually the third owner. The first owner bought it new from a dealership and rode it 500 miles in 2 years and then sold it. I don't know why people do that. I will never understand why anyone would buy a new motorcycle and only put 500 miles on it. Period. Full stop. If you're gonna buy a motorcycle, ride it. Put mileage on it. You know, he married a woman and then never did anything with her to save her for the next guy. What are you doing, man? I just don't get it. Anyway, the second owner was a young kid. He was in his 20s. He bought it 6 months ago and put 2,000 miles on it, which props to him for actually getting it out and riding it some. It's still not a ton of mileage, but he at least definitely used the thing, which is cool. I have already put 300 miles on this bike, and I've owned it for 2 days. I'm going to ride the hell out of it. I'm going to ride it every single chance I get. Rain or shine, I do not care. It is going to get used. I live on a gravel road, so it's already gotten dirty on a gravel road. I rode it out here in the grass. It does great off-road. Jake the garden snake modified his to be a fake adventure bike. It's pretty much like a Tenere 700 pre-clone, I guess. He built it before they were readily available here in the States. I don't know that I'm ever gonna go that far, but I have actually considered putting the knobbies on it. I forget what they're called, but there's these knobbies they make that come in a really wide pattern that fit sport bikes great. And they look really cool. They look super aggressive. They're what he put on his bike, I believe. Anyway, I've considered doing that already. Maybe when these tires wear out, we'll go that way. But yeah, this thing is so fresh and new. I wanted to show you guys this. I've been wanting to do this for a couple of days, but I was saving it for YouTube. It still has the plastic protector on the gauge cluster, and I'm going to go ahead and remove it if I can. Come here, you. Man, I might have to get my knife onto this thing. Oh, there we go. There it goes. Look at that. Oh, the ASMR. Look at that. It still had the plastic protector on the gauge cluster. After 2,500 miles, no one had taken that off. I mean, again, I didn't need a bike this nice. I would have accepted a bike that was rougher. I considered buying the stunted out bike when that was one of the only examples I could really find that was in my price range. I was like, well, you know, I know these bikes will go a lot of mileage. I've seen on the owners groups, the owners forums and stuff, guys say they've seen 60,000 miles out of these bikes with just like oil changes, routine maintenance. They'll go a long time. So, you know, it wasn't that I was super crazy worried about the mileage. But again, if you're looking at a 2,500 2-year-old bike for $6,000 or a 5-year-old bike with 6,000 miles for $5,500, at that point, what is a $500 difference to get a much newer, lower mileage example? One thing that I will say about this bike also is that although it has a few modifications on it, not many. And this is the only one that I found on the marketplace that still had a stock exhaust. Everybody puts exhausts on these bikes, and I have read that if you put an exhaust, an intake, and a tune on these bikes, you're unlocking like 10 to 15 horsepower. It's a pretty big difference. You really wake the motor up with just an exhaust and a tune, a flash or whatever. But here's the thing. Having done a lot of car things in my day and having bought a lot of pre-modified vehicles, I always personally would like to stick to a more stock example to start with. If you can find a really clean stock example, I know some people will say, oh, but the other guy already paid for the modifications. That's true. But he paid for his modifications. He got to choose the color, he got to choose the exhaust, he got to choose the tune, and you don't know what that guy chose. You don't know if they were making smart decisions or dumb decisions. I've owned a ton of Honda Civics, and I gotta tell you, this is one of the classic things about Honda Civics. Every time you buy one, you're gonna find at least one super sketchy, terribly done modification that you hate, and you have to put back to stock because it's so bad. Whether it's a shitty, cheap Amazon quick release steering wheel, or a fart can on the exhaust, or someone put aftermarket bucket seats in it that don't recline and they're horribly uncomfortable. There's always something that you hate, that you're just like, God, why would they do this to this poor machine? And that's why I prefer to just find a nice stock example, and then you can get used to it, you can live with it, and you can decide, what do I really want to change and what do I want to leave alone? And honestly, so far, I don't find myself needing any more power than what this thing has. I think in the power department, it's already excellent. I love the power. It's fast. It's got plenty. When you open the wick on this thing, I mean, the roll-on torque is amazing. There's no reason to need more power than what this thing makes in its stock form. As far as modifications go, it came with an aftermarket seat that's supposed to be more comfortable than the stock seat. I don't know, we'll see. But But I plan on putting that on and just experimenting with it, because the seat is not lovely. It's not the best seat in the world. I don't know why motorcycle manufacturers, they always seem to cheap out on seats, which is super annoying. But yeah, the seat probably needs an update. I also think I'm gonna do a few modifications to the handlebars. I'm probably gonna get a taller and wider, like dirt bike style handlebar. And one mod that everyone seems to do that seems really popular is they switch to an R6 throttle tube, because the throttle tube on this bike, in order to actually open the throttle, I mean, your wrist is like way down here. The wide open throttle is so deep into the pull that you almost can never get there without turning your wrist an uncomfortable amount, or like doubling up on the throw. So like pull the throttle in and then move your hand up and then pull the throttle in some more to finally get to full throttle. And the R6 throttle tube is designed to be like a much shorter pull. I think it's a quarter turn or half turn of the bar or whatever. Anyways, so doing that doesn't actually change the power output or the power characteristics or how the engine is running at all. It just changes how you're able to open the throttle quicker. And I think that's definitely a modification that I'm going to do, because I've noticed on the stock bike it is pretty annoying how far you have to twist the throttle just to get to wide open. But other than that, I don't know that I'm going to change the exhaust. I like it being quiet, and it helps not piss my neighbors off so much. They already hate me, so, you know. Anyways, so there it is. My new 2021 third owner MT07. It is the post facelift model. I'm not sure that I'm a huge fan of the front end. It's kind of growing on me though. It's not as ugly as I first felt like it was. To be honest, at first I was like, man, why would they do that to the front end of this bike? It was so attractive before, and then they went and made it uglier. And honestly, I still feel that way. I still feel like the pre-facelift model is a little bit more attractive than the post-facelift. I'm just not a huge fan of this weird, like, individual tiny headlight here. But this bike, this is like an aftermarket windscreen. It might be a Yamaha part. I'm not exactly sure on that. Someone let me know in the comments if you know. But it does make it look a little bit better. And I do like the all black on black. You know, I was saying before that I really like the bikes that have the high-vis yellow wheels. And I do. I think those wheels look awesome. But the rest of the bike is like gray. And I don't get that. I feel like the high-vis wheels would have looked sick on the all black bike. But on the gray bike, it's not perfect. I think it would really make me happy if I could find a set of the high-vis wheels for sale to put on this bike, or possibly just take these wheels and get them powder coated to look like the high-vis color. I don't know. I don't know that I'll ever mess with it. It seems like more effort and money than it's really worth. It does look really great, just blacked out the way it is. It probably wouldn't have been my first choice. Like, if I was buying this bike new and I could have chose any color, I might have gone with something else, but it definitely looks really cool. And I've already gotten some compliments on it. People think it looks really awesome. So, you know, sometimes it just is what it is, and you end up with what you end up with. Now, I know I said this last time, but I swear to God, if you see this thing for sale, just shoot me. I'm not doing it. We're not getting rid of another motorcycle. I told you guys before that I went 10 years without owning a motorcycle, and I didn't think I needed one, to be honest. I was like, no, that's not a hobby I'm into. I want to do other things with my life. And the little KLX 250 that I had 3 or 4 months ago, it's like something clicked in my head, and I was like, you know, this is what my life has been missing. This is why my life is not as enjoyable as it used to be. This is why I'm not as happy as I used to be, because I don't have a motorcycle in my life, and that's what I really, really need. And I loved the DRZ. I had so much fun riding it, but like I said, it just wasn't quite the motorcycle for me. I think this one definitely is. This thing is so much fun to ride. I've really enjoyed it. It is overall plenty comfortable. I put a couple 100 miles on it yesterday and I wasn't really ready to get off of it, but I had to go do some other errands, so I ended up hopping in the car and doing those things. But I'm already planning a ride that should pass my mileage, my longest mileage ride so far, my personal record of long distance riding, and I plan to keep pushing that. It also came with some saddlebags. My friend Mark took me to go buy this bike. I bought the bike and rode it home, and he went home with all the extra accessories that came with the bike, so I don't have that stuff with me right now. But as soon as I get the saddlebags, I'm gonna put those back on the bike because I really like having luggage, as you can probably tell. This bag that's on the back is actually a tank bag that I bought like 4 motorcycles ago, back when I had a Honda VTR 1000 for like a minute. That bike was also too much, too fast, man, and uncomfortable, really uncomfortable. I got so many leg cramps on that bike. But I have this tank bag that's been sitting in my stuff ever since. It's magnetic, and this bike has a plastic tank. So it doesn't fit the tank very well at all. But it came with this SW Motec. This bag is really fancy. It's like magnetic, it clips right off. It's really neat. It's cool how it works. It's just really small. I don't know if I'm going to just replace it and maybe potentially sell that one because it's pretty expensive. Or they do make larger versions that are for the same system that can clip on, and I could keep this one as a small bag and then have a larger one as a larger option. I don't know yet. We'll see. But yeah, I definitely like having luggage on the bike so I can carry lots of things, tools and gear and food and snacks and water and all the stuff that you want with you on a motorcycle ride. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I am planning on trying to get some ride videos in, so stay tuned for that. And as always, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. And if you enjoy this, you want to keep seeing more, then let me know. Thanks.